The Ontario government has released its best guess plan for reopening schools in September. Doug Ford notes that when it comes to keeping our kids safe, I won't take any unnecessary risks. Well, it looks like the original recommendation by Toronto's leading experts at Sick Kids Hospital was thrown a political curveball when the updated guidance for school reopening doesn't appear to be based on any science or evidence-based decision-making. The suggested implementations will have lasting psychological effects, especially to the youngest and most vulnerable pupils, not to mention it looks like they're entirely unnecessary. That is, if you look at the data. The guideline published by Sick Kids is riddled with concerning verbiage, such as evidence specific to children and youth on non-medical masks is lacking. There is a lack of evidence that wearing a non-medical mask prevents SARS-CoV-2 transmission in children and in youth. There are limited data on the effectiveness on non-medical masks used for source control, but there remains a theoretical benefit, especially for older children and youth. Studies focusing on SARS-CoV-2 transmission in the school setting are limited. There is limited evidence on which to base a pre-specified class size. We can see the reoccurring theme here: limited, lacking, and theoretical. It's almost as if they all went, well, there's limited data and evidence, but there's a theoretical probability. So let's implement these psychologically damaging protocols and hope for the best, because health and safety first. So what does the data say? Check out this screenshot from Ontario's Public Health Epidemiological Stats. Children are at a 0% risk of death from the Wuhan flu. There have been 0 deaths reported in the province of Ontario in the age groups of 0 to 30. So follow me here for a second. If we contrast this with data from the Ministry of Transportation, wow, children are actually exponentially more likely to die being transported to and from school than they are from the virus.
Well, the solution is obvious, isn't it, folks? Let's ban commuting, or better yet, let's just ban the automobile. Yes, of course I jest, but trust me, there are likely some Greta Thunberg acolytes out there nodding in agreement. And joining me now to discuss this further is one of our newest Rebel reporters, Tamara Ugolini. Welcome to Rebel Roundup, Tamara.
Thank you, David.
Pleasure to have you in here. Tamara, it's very interesting, the Wuhan virus. When you look at the stats, healthy children, that is the least likely demographic to get the Wuhan virus. Mm-hmm. And yet, look at what we're doing. We have, in this province, we canceled sleepover summer camp for kids, which I think was an absolute atrocious shame. And now there is this hysteria about going back to school, when you showed in your superb report that if you look at the statistics, when you look at the science, that's not where the hysteria should be. In fact, if anything, we should be directing more resources to long-term care facilities where 82% of the deaths from this virus have occurred.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I think the government, it's been highlighted several times to the Ford government that the people most at risk here are the elderly. And of course, that military report highlighted the squalor that these poor people are living in. I mean, that's a disease-breeding environment in and of itself. So why the focus isn't there and on these poor elderly vulnerable populations instead of the children? And as that graph from Ontario Public Health showed, 0 to 30, like next to zero risk there for that age group. So, hypocrisy seems to be more and more the new normal. So what are they thinking? What are they doing here?
Yeah, what are they doing? It's funny you say that, because yesterday in The Sun, there was a column by Smokey Thompson. He, of course, is the president of the Ontario, the Ontario Public Service Employees Union. And in his column, Tamara, basically what he was saying, it was about going back to school. Mm-hmm. He said it's going to take a lot of work in a short period of time to make it happen. And then one of his concluding graphs is, we are calling for a brief timeout for all of the players to be part of a plan that puts health and safety first. In other words, he wants 2 more weeks of summer vacation for the teachers. Tamara, the schools have been locked down since mid-March.
Yeah.
They need more time. I mean, what have they been doing all these months?
Yeah, what is it, 6 months now of 2 weeks to flatten the curve? And here we are, still have best guess solutions for back to school. I mean, riddled in that Sick Kids report, you saw it, was a lot of theoreticals and possibilities. But let's look at the data, let's look at the science, let's get some experts who are, able to do the same and decipher for themselves and provide actual recommendations that make sense. And again, if we're talking about the health and safety of children, well, let's prioritize their psychological health and emotional, mental, and of course, their actual ability to be in a classroom and learn. I mean, masking teachers for some of these poor students, they're not going to know what's going on. They won't be able to understand and decipher what their teacher's even saying to them.
And Tamara, isn't this part of the problem? You mentioned experts and what the experts are saying, and yet if we go back several months, Dr. Theresa Tam was saying, don't wear masks. On March the 8th, you can look it up, folks, Dr. Fauci in the US, Theresa Tam's equivalent in America, was speaking out against masks. It was going to do more harm than good. He said that. And suddenly they do a 180. So I don't know, as someone who is not a virologist, I'm getting really confused and concerned about what the real truth is.
That's right, and I think a lot of people are starting to see that there doesn't seem to be a lot of cohesiveness in these recommendations. I mean, the government's pretty much been the leading outputter of misinformation throughout the whole COVID-19 pandemic. They told us masks don't work, we won't need to close down the borders, the Wuhan flu is going to sail right over Canada, and I think Theresa Tam even said that the closing borders is racist.
Oh yeah, well I remember Nancy Pelosi saying, go to Chinatown and celebrate Chinese New Year, and if you don't, you're a racist.
That's right.
So forget about social distancing back then, and now you got to keep 2 meters or 6 feet apart.
When they note even the 1 meter potentially provides protection. So it's like, where are these recommendations coming from? Are they evidence-based? Yeah. And why the 2 meters and not the 1? If it highlight, like the Sick Kids report even can highlight, that 1 meter still offers protection.
Well, and to pursue this line of thinking even further, Tamara, we know from the death toll of the Wuhan virus, this is really just a very bad flu season kind of death toll when you look at the numbers, not the infections, but the people that actually died. So if masks are effective and work, then why haven't health authorities for years during flu season being mandating masks? We know the flu is highly infectious, so why for those flus were masks not even thought of, and suddenly for this particular type of flu, if you want to call it that, it's mandatory?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that as you can research and find the data that shows that masking the general public who've never been educated in how to properly, they call it donning and docking, so the correct way to take on and put on a mask. I mean, the general public have no idea how to do these sorts of protocols. So what they're doing is actually just increasing their infection risk because they're touching inside of their mask, they're taking it on and off, they're holding it down on their chin. I mean, they're putting it in their pocket.
And that's exactly what Dr. Fauci was saying.
Yeah.
As to why this is worse than going maskless. So it's crazy. And yet, Tamara, I just anecdotally, when I'm out and about, I just see so many people complying with this when they're walking alone outdoors, when somebody is driving in their own vehicle by themselves and they're masked up. Yeah. And it's staggering. And we're going a bit off topic, but when I first met you, it was in Coburg. It was for that caper about people reclaiming the beach. And they found a way around the bylaw. You could go up the pier and jump into the water, and they couldn't do anything about that. And yet that's public. That information is out there. But we spoke off camera. I thought the people of Coburg and the tourists coming into Coburg would say, hey, here is a lawful way to enjoy that beautiful beach at Coburg. But hardly anybody at least, is doing that, are they?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, there is no bylaw in place in Coburg. They've just arbitrarily closed off the beach with the fencing. There's not an actual bylaw in place. It's just it's closed, end of story, you can't access the beach. However, you've always been able to access the beach from the pier and go through into the shoreline. I mean, there's a lot of gray area with who actually owns that space and what the rights are of the people to access the shoreline of Great Lake. Now, in Cobourg, I think it was 2007, the opposite side of the beach, it's called West Beach in Cobourg, and not where we were filming that day, but just west of where we were, about 3 kilometers, I'd say. There are homeowners along that shoreline who legitimately own land. Their lot line goes, in some instances, I think, up to 20 feet into the water. And now they were having issues with pedestrians strolling their shorelines. And so the town actually had a dispute with these homeowners. And again, I think it was 2007. Where the town won that these homeowners couldn't fence off their property lines that go out into the water and couldn't have signage that discriminates against the pedestrians trying to access the shoreline. So the town knows, they must know that there is a precedence here that people have the legal right to access shorelines. I mean, there's a lot of safety concerns if people, something happens, you're on a sea-doo out in the lake there, which you're allowed, as long as you own a sea-doo or you have a boat or a kayak, absolutely, that space is free reign. And if there's ever an incident where you need to get to shore quickly, well, you need to be able to access that shoreline, which has now been completely fenced off. So it's a bit of a safety concern as well. And then as you saw when we were there, the seagulls have taken over.
Oh, yeah.
So now it's also not clean. There's the hygiene of that waterfront now. I mean, how much is that going to cost to clean up?
Yeah, it's really something. And, before we wrap, Tamara, we should make mention, the way we originally got in touch, it was a Fight the Fines case. It was you and your friend strolling on the Cobourg beach. You were arrested, you were handcuffed, you were put in a police cruiser.
I was held in a jail cell.
Into a jail cell for almost 2 hours, I believe.
That's right.
And, we are going to fight those fines for you, and I guess there's no update. That hasn't been heard, of course. And,
not yet.
But we've got our eye on that. And isn't that something, folks? You might recall last Sunday at Cherry Beach in Toronto, you had those 2 lunatics with chainsaws descending on the beach, lunging at pedestrians, going after cyclists, sawing apart $4,000 of DJ equipment. And what was notable was that both individuals have a long criminal record, which begs the question, why aren't they in jail right now? I wonder, is it because of the social distancing laws, freeing violent offenders? But Tamara Ugolini, holy mackerel, calling all cars. She's strolling on the beaches of Cobourg. What a world, what a world. Well, folks, bringing you the other side of the story does not come cheap. Sometimes we need security in order to bring you the other side of the story because there are forces afoot that don't want us to bring you the other side of the story. If you can, please go to journalistdefensefund.com. That's journalistdefensefund.com and make a donation.